Well, good morning and welcome to Philosophy Live. Today we are looking at a rather unusual educational experiment. St. James School for Children in London has been teaching Sanskrit for nearly 50 years. Now, if anyone watching isn't familiar with Sanskrit, this is quite a sophisticated ancient language, quite often associated with ancient India. So welcome again to Philosophy Live. My name is Christine Lambie. I'm a student and a tutor in the School of Philosophy and Economic Science. Now, having said welcome to Philosophy Live, I should say this interview is being pre-recorded as our guest speaker is actually teaching on Friday mornings. So today's guest is Warwick Jessup. Warwick has degrees in Sanskrit, both from Oxford and SOAS. He and his wife, Elena, have devised a structured program for teaching Sanskrit to children from age 5 to 16, including the public exams which are available. Now, Warwick is head of Sanskrit at St. James and also a student in the School of Philosophy. So let me bring in Warwick. Good morning, Warwick.
Good morning, Christine. Happy to
Thanks
see you.
for joining us. Yes. So let's jump straight in. You're teaching at an English children's school, not the obvious catchment for this ancient language. So what was the reason for introducing children to Sanskrit? I mean, most schools might offer French or Spanish or something. So why was this done?
Well, we do teach French, we do teach Spanish, we do teach Greek and Latin. But the founder of St. James decided that the teaching of language should be based on Sanskrit. So it's an important subject for us. Why? He gave 3 reasons. He said that Sanskrit appears to be, or be close to, the mother of all Indo-European languages. Now, our pupils, for the most part, do speak Indo-European languages. So if you like, this takes them to the roots of their language. By studying Sanskrit, they learn about the basic grammar, just as you would with Greek and Latin. But if you like, you're going back even further to the very deepest roots of the Indo-European languages. Secondly, he said that the Sanskrit language is full of profound concepts. This is a big subject, but essentially, this is the philosophy of the East. But it's not just the philosophy of the East. This is universal philosophy, which it introduces the children to. And thirdly, he says that this language has not changed over the millennia. So the Sanskrit we have now is the Sanskrit which we know existed in 500 BC, because there was a grammarian called Parnini who actually codified it in 500 BC. And furthermore, we have scriptures going back as far as 1500 BC. So old is gold, and humans have really valued this language. It's been preserved in an oral tradition for generations. So what we're touching here is the wisdom of the ancients.
Yes, those are very long numbers, aren't they? So old, so long ago. But let me go back to profound concepts. You mentioned Sanskrit is introducing these profound concepts to children. Can you give an example of that?
Okay, easiest way is for me to teach you a little prayer, which is this. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritangamaya. So this is a prayer to be led from Asat, the untruth, to the Sat, to the truth, to that which is real. From Tamas, from darkness, to Jyoti, to light. From the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. And thirdly, Mrityu, from Mrityu, from death to immortality, Amritam. Now this needs a little explanation. It's going beyond things which are passing. It's remembering one's eternal self, which is behind the scenes. And that gives us a little bliss. And so these profound concepts are more than just an intellectual thing. This is how we are, our very being. And this prayer is encouraging us to remember that eternal being, which is beyond the passing show of this world. And that gives bliss.
So those really are profound concepts for children, aren't they? What would you say is the effect on the children? How do they respond to this? You know, these are quite abstract, deep thoughts in a way. So how do they respond?
We always try to present it in a fun way. In fact, our first books are called Sanskrit is Fun. It's important that enjoyment and learning go together. So it has to be presented in a fun fashion. Also systematic fashion. And they love it. Often they say, oh, it's one of my favorite subjects. It's so exciting, Sanskrit, they've actually said. So young children in particular are very open to it. And the older ones also respond very well. And it's strangely one of the most popular subjects. So yeah, there's no problem with it, as long as it's presented well, systematically, and in a light way.
Mm. So you mentioned systematically. That might be a moment for me to just share this slide. I mentioned that you developed this whole systematic program of books. Do you want to comment on this? You've got here, I've just put together the images of the different textbooks.
Sure. Well, I mentioned Sanskrit is Fun. Those 3 books, one with the kangaroo, then the giraffe, then the bird, they are introducing the Sanskrit script, the Devanagari script, which is quite something. And then we start on simple grammar and stories of Krishna, part 1 and 2 in the top right there. Then we have the stories from the Mahabharata down in the bottom left. Those are actually our senior books. And then also story of Rama, which are actually part of our prep school offering. That one in the bottom right is actually a condensed form of Sanskrit is Fun, stories of Krishna and stories of Rama. So we give that actually to year 7 pupils who arrive. And if they're bright pupils, they can take it on very quickly. And that book summarizes all those other books. Anyway,
that is a tremendous work over decades, isn't it, to put together that whole program?
Mainly my wife. I shouldn't take all the credit for this. And huge effort from a whole team of people over many years. So I shouldn't take personal credit for these books. It's been a team effort. Yes.
Anyway, it's an amazing effort, really, to create a whole system that a child can just pick up. So congratulations on that. So now, because we're here in the UK and England, schools are subject to inspections. Now, you've been teaching at St. James for nearly 40 years. What is the response of inspectors to your teaching of Sanskrit?
Very positive. They're a bit nervous, first of all, because they haven't come across this before, understandably. But as soon as they start going into the lessons, they start getting very enthusiastic. And you did mention this before we met. And so I do have 1 or 2 quotations here, actually, which I could read. They said, this is a number of years ago, across the age range, pupils are wholly motivated, utterly absorbed in and intrigued by what they are doing. Their concentration is often intense. This was a good day, I must say. And their behavior is immaculate. That's not always the case, I must say. But anyway, it was on that day. Several pupils were audibly disappointed when their lesson had to end. So anyway, we got an accolade on that occasion from the inspectors. And we've always had very complimentary comments from the inspectors without fail.
That's tremendous. That's really tremendous. Now, let me go back a little bit. The response of the children. I can imagine that bright children would take to a complicated language with 7 cases. What happens with children? How do children with educational difficulties respond to Sanskrit, for example?
This is really interesting. And I was quite surprised about this, because when I started, I thought, well, it's only the brighter children who are going to do well at this. But no, the special educational needs children thrive with this subject as well. How? Well, I'll give you one particular example. There's a girl actually who arrived in year 7, and she had dyslexia. I won't mention her name.
Sure.
But she had dyslexia, and she was feeling a bit down. She'd been through a prep school and was finding it difficult at school. And she came across Sanskrit. And she found that what was on the page was what you read, because Sanskrit is entirely phonetic. And this was a huge boost for her. She started getting confident in all her subjects. And she only told me about this actually last summer, that it had changed her path in life, her education, because now she felt more confident, and she's actually gone off to an American university. Is doing very well. I think she wants to become a lawyer, but
Wow.
she's bright, but she had some difficulties. It's one particular example. There are many. What I would say is Sanskrit has a divine influence. And what I've seen is that every child benefits from it in some way or other. So no, this works for all types of children.
That's fascinating. That's really fascinating. And what about, in that case, you mentioned the script is phonetic. What about the effect of the sounding, pronouncing these different sounds? You probably got children who are not English. You've got children coming from different countries for whom English is perhaps their second language. How does the actual sounding work for children? Is that useful for them?
I would say this is the most divine aspect. And we begin every lesson with some recitation of Sanskrit. And what I found is that it creates this clarity of atmosphere. And if you start with the recitation of Sanskrit, such as I've demonstrated, Asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. If you begin with those beautiful sounds, it clears the atmosphere, it clears the mind. We have parents of young children who say, oh, my child is singing Sanskrit in the bath. I can't stop her or him. And it is great. It's infectious, this delight, which is found through the sound of it. So yeah, it's probably the most important aspect of the study.
I noticed in the books also you've based it on Rama, Mahabharata, and so on. So obviously the children are also getting the epic content from the, some of the greatest works of human literature as well, aren't they?
Absolutely. And they do love the stories. I tell stories in assembly once a week, and they are fascinated by it. And the stories are full of interesting twists. You never quite know what's going to happen next, but there's always something elevating, some point to bring out, something which they really need to hear. And you find that the children actually, if you ask them questions, they can then lecture you back for quite a long time on the detail of the story. And something like the Mahabharata has so many characters, but they take great delight in these marvelous stories.
I also think in the two major Indian epics, you've got these kind of superhuman achievements, and I think that gives so much imagination in a very exciting way. I can do anything. Is that the case? Do children take to that?
I would say, yeah. There's a sense of limitlessness.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's rather larger than life. But it's great to be introduced to a world which is larger than life.
Sure.
Because it takes one beyond. It's a bit like this mrityorma amritam gamaya, the lead me from death to immortality. Well, that immortality is also the limitlessness. And one does get this sense of having no limits, no boundaries, with these great stories, these great heroes.
Mm,
Yeah, I
mm,
totally agree.
mm. Now, I know you do an annual Sanskrit speaking or recitation competition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's a marvelous thing which has developed over decades, really. And yes, as I say, every lesson begins with recitation, and we gradually build up, because in the end, the Sanskrit tradition is an oral tradition. Sanskrit is not really found in books. It is spoken. And so we are great believers in getting the children to recite it. And many of them love reciting. And so, yeah, they learn normally 5 verses per annum and are able to recite them with the English by the end of the year. And we develop translations which can help them really understand some of the philosophy of the texts. They need to be suitable for children, so it's very important that the translations are suitable for that age group. And they love performing it, and we have some magnificent performances. We get judges in from places like Oxford, and yeah, the audience is normally bowled over with it.
I can imagine. So now here's the problem I can envisage. You're teaching the children Sanskrit and they come home and they're reciting it. What happens with the parents when they can't help with the homework or they don't know what the children are learning? How do you handle that?
Well, children actually like it if their parents don't know something and they do know it. So they think they've got one up on their parents there. So that's a bit of a boon. And the parents are fascinated because this is something fairly unique. And we offer a parents class, and a lot of parents do come and really enjoy it. So yeah, we get parents involved as well. And I think that's important. Yeah.
Very nice. So you spent close on 40 years. This is the better part of your professional life, dedicating yourself to teaching children. What is your vision for this subject? I know how deeply committed you are to it. What would you like to see for this subject?
I think that Sanskrit can give us a brighter future, and particularly if we give it to children, it would lead to a brighter future, because Sanskrit releases natural intelligence and happiness. It's a tremendous training for the mind, but it opens up parts of the being, the emotions. It opens up this divine world. And so I think it has something very important to contribute to education. And if anyone is listening who guides education, perhaps we should consider this for the future. We introduced Greek and Latin in this country some centuries ago, but what about Sanskrit? We live in a global community, and this is a global language. It can benefit everyone.
I love a global vision. That's wonderful. Yes, absolutely. So if you wanted to leave us with one final word, how we normally end with, how can philosophy help us today? How can Sanskrit help us today? What would you say?
Bliss. Simple as that. And it's the bliss which is beyond that which is passing, beyond the agitations of the mind. And if we fall quiet within ourselves, we experience that amritam, that immortality, that bliss of immortality. And that's what Sanskrit easily gives us access to, that bliss which is always there.
I think that's a lovely note to end on. Warwick, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm on this subject.
Not at all. Lovely to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us, for watching. So I'll just close with Warwick's final words. Here's how philosophy can help us today. That bliss, that amrita, that nectar of immortality. If you've enjoyed this video, please like it and share it. Follow us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. And join us again next Friday at 8:30 a.m. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.